Good morning, Belvedere High School. This is BHS Principal Mr. Lewis, and I am recording a presentation that I delivered this past Tuesday at Open House regarding our transition to proficiency-based grading. We had a few technical issues, and some things on the initial recording from the PAC were a little hard to see, so I thought it'd be easier and hopefully a useful resource to record this right here in the office and hopefully, like I said, provide some valuable information to our families about what is going on here at BHS in District 100. I am touching on a few things from week one, and then a bulk of the presentation is going to be on proficiency-based grading and what that entails. So some takeaways first off, we at BHS and then throughout the district have really been focusing on the first 20 days of the school year to get students and staff comfortable in routines and structures of school and having everyone feel safe and feel confident and feel focused to have a good, successful school year. And we've been off to a good start. I'm really proud of our staff and students for how things have gone so far. And one of the things we've been focusing on is Buck Club. It's a weekly advisory, and it used to include a number of things going on in the school, voting for various things, showing videos on a number of topics, which is all really, really important. But we narrowed that focus to make it a place for connection where students and staff can slow down from the week for a minute and connect. Teachers are given prompts and they're given strategies for just be able to have conversations with students, see what their goals are for the week and see how they can be supported. We really appreciate the support from students and families. We still have a lot of curveballs that have been thrown our way at the start of the year, and we're doing our best to adjust, and our continued partnership with our families is appreciated every single day. Thank you so much. Same can be said about our staff. We have a great staff here at BHS. They are committed to providing the best education possible for our students and best support for our families, no matter what the circumstances are. One thing we're working on is lunch. We moved to 3 lunches this year, so that has been an adjustment, and we're looking at that to see if there's anything that could be done to make that even more efficient and positive for students. And lastly, last takeaway from week one is the challenge of COVID. Contact tracing and having those conversations with students and families about quarantines, trying to make sure that we have good educational support for students when they're on quarantine. We feel better about our structure, but that is something that we need to constantly be working on so that every student receives the support that they need throughout this COVID era, whether they're here in school, whether it is a situation of quarantine or anything else. Right. So one big part of our year, week one and beyond, is our transition to PBG. So there's 3 different things I want to touch on: an overview of what it is and why we're doing it, what we're doing to ensure teacher consistency in grading, and the Empower system. First, talking about why we are doing this, and we're going to use an analogy to illustrate it. And we're thinking about taking a trip somewhere. We can choose the destination. Normally, you can choose the destination, the time that you're leaving, the time you're returning, the airline, but this is a special trip, so we actually get to choose the pilot that's going to fly our plane. So the question is, would you want to fly with this pilot? So the person's pilot school grade is a 90% or an A, and that is the only information that we have. Most people might look at that and feel fairly confident flying with that pilot. But now we're going to look at a different teacher who grades traditionally and gives us a little bit more information about how that 90% comes about. So the traditional grading scale, this pilot is evaluated on their participation, homework, behavior, projects, and assessments. Some very traditional categories that we might see that make up a percentage grade and a letter grade on the 100-point scale. So this pilot looks like they do well in participation, homework, projects, behavior, and assessments is the one area that they are struggling in. So when we look at that in a little more detail, it might make us think a little bit differently on whether or not we'd want to fly with that pilot. Now let's look at this a different way. So if we pause for a second, when we determine how many points are going to be used for a various category in traditional grading, that's really up to the teacher and sometimes the team. So you could see a situation like this, where teacher number 2, same category, and they decide that the assessments, they're going to have a lot more points as part of the grade. So if they score the same way in all those other categories, but the assessments weigh heavier on the total grade, then that is going to impact that letter grade. And that's what we see in traditional grading. So when I touch on teacher consistency in a moment, you'll be able to refer back to this. So the teachers are evaluating the pilot on a traditional grading scale. Depending on how they use the assessments, you'll see a different impact on their overall grade. So let's take a look at a teacher grading this pilot on a proficiency-based grading or proficiency-based performance scale. So instead of grading categories, we have competencies, or we have skills that are important for a pilot to master on a 1 through 4 scale. So instead of homework, instead of projects, we look at specific skills like taking off, cruising, cabin pressure, communication, and landing. So would we want to fly with this pilot if this was their performance-based score? Doing well on takeoff, cruising, cabin pressure, and communication. But the landing, they receive a score of a 1. I'm guessing your answer from the initial slide to right now has probably changed drastically. So let's use that analogy to talk about PBG overview and why we're doing it. So performances are measured and reported by individual standard, like you saw in that last slide. Practice and homework, the pilot is going to have thousands of hours in a simulator at no consequence before they ever get in an actual plane where lives are at stake. So practice and homework here at school, we push students to try their best, but we don't put the pressure on them of a grade on every single thing. Okay, so it's primarily for feedback. Along those lines, students have multiple opportunities to demonstrate their learning. And within this system, specific needs are quickly identified and addressed. As you saw in that previous slide, we know that landing is the area of concern. The letter grade itself is determined by a logic model. So if we take a look at that previous student and we see how they fared at the end of the semester and what that letter grade looks like, they actually dropped a little in their communication, but really improved their landing. So that is good news. So because most of the standards were at the level 3 and there were no 1s, according to our logic model, that is the final grade. So that is an overview of what the PBG system is and why we're doing it. So short term, more specific learning feedback for students. And we see exactly where they're doing well, and we see exactly where they need support. Long term, this is a step towards a competency-based education system. And a competency-based education system means that students advance based on their readiness, not because of how old they are. So traditional education, we say that if you're a certain age, if you were born at a certain time, then you are in this grade level and this is what you are learning. And as long as you learn enough of that, then you can move on to the next grade level at the start of the next year. So you stay with your same age peers for the most part, even if you didn't learn something as well as the person next to you. And even if that's something you didn't learn well, was really, really, really important. So the competency-based system is based on moving along based on readiness. And when a student or anyone is working at their readiness level, they're going to be more focused and more motivated. If you look at the alternatives, a student who is way underprepared for that level of learning is going to have a tough time staying motivated and not quitting. A student who is well overprepared for their level of learning is probably going to be bored. So that is what we're looking for. And an illustration to demonstrate this comes from Dolphin Swim Club in Rockford. And these names describe the levels of swimming that that a swimmer can be designated under. And the swimmers, when they are ready, they advance to the next level in the program. It could be 2 days or it could be 3 weeks. And the consequences of advancing when you're ready in swimming make a whole lot of sense. Because if a student cannot swim well and they're put in a position where they have to, that could be very, very dangerous. So those are 3 levels. You start with starfish, as you can see, very beginning swimmers. You go through some mid-levels, the whale, dolphin, and blowfish, and then the most complex levels, the stingray, turtle, and shark, where you see at that bottom description, students are swimming up to 200 yards at a time. And if you take a closer look at what is required at some of these levels, the starfish, the most basic level, is for blowing bubbles and just adjusting to the water. Whereas if you jump up a couple of levels, the dolphin, students are expected to successfully perform things like freestyle and backstroke. So again, going back to student readiness and student confidence, it's important to put students in a position with where they are at, where their current levels of learning are, so we can give them the support they need, whether they are jumping in the water for the first time or they're ready for the backstroke. And that applies to school as well. Second part, teacher consistency. So the work that we've done in the PBG system has allowed us to develop higher levels of teacher consistency in grading than we've ever had before. The first thing that teachers do in their course curriculum development is determine priority standards. So what are the standards that make up that letter grade? Step 2, they determine what proficiency looks like for those standards. So if you take the landing a plane standard, for example, what does it actually mean to land that proficiently? Is it okay if I skid the bottom of the plane a little bit or not? Do I have to have the wheels out the whole way and locked in or not? So that may be a silly example, but those are the kind of conversations that we ask teachers to have on a weekly basis when they're talking about learning standards for students. Once they have that clarity on what performance is supposed to look like, step 3 is they review student evidence against that criteria. And they have those discussions on where a student rates on the rubric, what kind of feedback and support they want to provide as necessary. And that kind of jumps into step 4. After they review student evidence and discuss it against criteria, they respond by providing extra learning opportunities, extra support opportunities, enrichment opportunities, depending on what a student needs. A priority for this year is to build teacher capacity with the Empower system that is going to support this whole movement. So those are going to be the last few slides of this presentation. We gave students a copy of this PBG Empower Student Competency Sheet at our class assemblies these last 2 weeks. And these are competencies that students need to be really, really good at with the Empower system. And what that is going to do is that's going to give them the clarity on their course progress, what they're doing well at, and where they need support. If you look at some of those highlighted terms like course playlist, pacing, gray bar, and progress report, those are some tools that give students and give you families that clarity, as well as us as a staff. So I've got a few screenshots of some of these highlighted terms to show you what is available. So this is an example of a portion of a student homepage, and you can see in one class the student is behind pace, and in another class the student is on pace. And what that means is being on pace means you are on track showing proficiency for all the priority standards by the time the course term ends, and you're on track to earn credit. That's essentially what it is. And the gray bar allows you to go specifically into standards to see a performance level on individual standards. Clicking into the gray bar, you can go deeper and you can see what the expected level of mastery is for students and what their actual performance level is against that expected level. So based on the amount of time and the amount of opportunities and the amount of progress, that expected score is established by the teacher, and then they give real feedback on where the student lands. So in one standard that you see the arrows pointing to, they're exactly where they're expected to be. And then on the standard below, they're slightly behind pace. This is an example of a playlist and activity. So the standard is right there in the middle of the page, operations on polynomials, and then there are various activities to help support a student's understanding of that standard. And this is another view from the student's view, okay, a playlist, and it highlights a big idea tied to a standard and all the different activities that are available to help a student reach proficiency on that standard. The last couple slides are on what a report card is going to look like. So if you look at this example of a report card, the information that you see summarizes the individual standards. And then if you see that EXP in the middle of the report, that's the expected level of mastery, okay, where a student is expected to be. So in the AP Stats class on one standard, they're expected to be all the way at a level 3. But on the second standard, exploring 2 variable data, they're only expected to be at the level 2 at this point in the semester. EL Language Arts, same thing. Okay, they're expected to be at different levels for the various standards, and then the individual progress is outlined. So you can see the difference between those 2 classes. One, they are on pace, and then in math, AP Stats, and then EL Language Arts, they are behind pace. And the reason they're behind pace is because of that 1 that you see. So a 1 means we're not showing any kind of progress towards proficiency, and a student is behind pace if they're at a 1 when they're expected to be at a 2 or a 3. That's how that is defined. The only thing missing from this report card that you'll eventually see is a letter grade. So that is not going to be on all the time, just at certain points throughout the year, but that letter grade will be part of this report as well. And then from there, you can, as I've tried to articulate during this presentation, you can look at the letter grade, and then you can use the rest of the report to learn more. Where is the student struggling? And it can serve as a conversation starter for families and students and teachers. So we're struggling, we're a little behind in the character analysis standard, so where are we struggling with that? And then we can pinpoint the support, we can pinpoint the conversations. That's going to make things just go faster for the student and his or her progress. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this. I hope it was helpful. Please reach out to us if there is anything that we can do to help you or your students, and we'll be happy to do so. Thanks for your support, and go Bucks.